Great. Mr. Crenshaw.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here. And look, I think you're all very serious security professionals, intelligence professionals, and I think that most of this report certainly reflects that. But there is a glaring exception to that, and specifically in the section on climate change and environmental degradation. Now, don't get me wrong, I think this is indeed an issue, but I addressed this issue on a very different committee, not here, and for very good reason. So I have a simple question. What creates greater geopolitical instability? Is it the occasional severe weather event, or is it energy insecurity? In other words, the inability of nations to secure reliable and affordable sources of energy. Which one creates more global chaos and therefore represents a national security threat to the United States? Is it one or the other or both? I suppose I'll direct that question, I'm sorry, but to you, Director Haines, because you mentioned it earlier.
No, thank you, sir.
One or the other or both, because I have a lot to say on this.
I don't have a way of quantifying it for you, so I'm happy to try to take that for the record if that's useful.
Okay. Let's assume you try to say both or one or the other, but the report only says one. The report only says one. But if it was both, then why wouldn't energy scarcity be mentioned as a global threat? Why isn't radical environmentalism mentioned as a global threat? The last few years have some pretty glaring examples, and I'm going to point them out in my limited time here. In Sri Lanka, radical environmentalist policies led to the collapse of farming outputs and the collapse of a government. The same thing is currently happening in the Netherlands, where their entire farming industry is under threat. In Pakistan, your report mentions some flooding, but says nothing of the hundreds of millions of people without power because of energy scarcity due to foolish green energy policies by the Europeans that have made natural gas so unaffordable in countries like Pakistan. European energy prices have gone through the roof, and they now desperately import coal and wood to burn because they engaged in misguided green energy policies for years. The WHO estimates that 3 million deaths result per year from lack of clean cooking fuels, meaning they're burning wood or dung instead of fossil fuels like propane and natural gas. These things are truly destabilizing to global security, but there isn't a section in this report about it. The report does say that it's weather events that are a national security threat and that tensions will rise as developing nations request reparations from developed nations. Of course, the assumption is that all weather events are due to climate change. That's not science, by the way, it's an assumption, and I wouldn't expect assumptions from senior intelligence professionals. It's worth examining the actual science. Has anybody read the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, all 4,000 pages? Really? Okay. But let's assume you have. It's got some good data in it, actually. I like that report, and it would help this report be more objective. For instance, it actually makes science-based predictions about what the true economic cost of climate change will be over the next 100 years. It says the cost of climate change by the year 2100 will be a 4.5% reduction in global GDP from what it otherwise would be, not from what it is now, from what it otherwise would be. So if we go on our trend of growth, we'd grow global GDP by 450%. The cost of climate change make that maybe 434%. That is not a national security threat, and I'm sure you all agree with that. The report also states that insured losses due to catastrophes from climate change have increased 250% in the past 30 years. That is a fact taken way out of context. It's misleading. And again, I wouldn't expect it from intelligence professionals because the obvious explanation is that there's more homes and more infrastructure built on coastal areas. The truth is, the facts are that the deaths from natural disasters have decreased 90% over the last 100 years. The truth is that the trend in accumulated cyclonic energy, a metric that captures frequency, duration, and intensity of global hurricane activity, shows no increasing in trends. In 2021, we had the fewest hurricanes since satellite tracking began 40 years ago. NOAA modeling shows that hurricanes making landfall will decrease 25% as the climate changes. The UN report, the science, that never says red alert, never says crisis, never says any of the stuff commonly used by climate alarmists. I'm running out of time, so I just want to summarize if the chairman will let me. When we say this kind of stuff and we detract from the very important topics that you all have been talking about this entire time, we detract from that. And it's even worse when we don't at least balance it with the more obvious threat of energy insecurity globally and the destabilizing effects that creates. That's my problem with this report, and I hope we fix it next time, and I yield back. Thank you.